I think one of the things that sets Stargate apart is that it's modern day people in sci-fi environments, basically. And that is unusual. Like normally it's set in the future, or like there's us essentially, right? The humans from Earth are more advanced usually in these shows than we are, right? And these, I think one of the things that's really appealing about Stargate to me is that this is us, right? This is contemporary people. They have, at least initially, have all the technology that we have, right? That the real world militaries and governments have. So it mixes this strange realism between like the mythological part and then the sci-fi part, but then it's also very grounded because these are just people from modern day Earth. And then it does get in a few weeks, if we do the Stargate Atlantis pilot, then we'll see what that looks like after 8 seasons. But initially it starts out very grounded, right? In this pilot, much like in the movie, it's just guys with rifles going to another planet. And I think that sets us apart from something like Star Trek, which is very, very much in the future and very like humanity at its best, right? Or Star Wars, which is very far removed from reality, right? Like in terms of who the characters are and the planets and the technology and everything. And Stargate kind of sits in the middle, where it's very grounded at its core, but it puts you into these weird situations where you're fighting like alien god emperors and so on.
I remember there was a scene, right, when they were coming through the portal, and then when one of the soldiers brought someone from that planet, and then she shouted like, "Don't shoot, it's a refugee." I was like, oh shit, he's actually a refugee, but it's a refugee from a different planet. So it felt very it felt very like entwined with reality. So yeah, so I think
it's the real world military, right? They work by the same rules, at least initially, as any other modern day military, right? And these are refugees that caught up in a military mission, right? And that had to be rescued.
And I can see how
this is in a way like very real. One thing about the show is that they worked very closely together with the Air Force. This bunker complex where the gate is, that's a central command of the nuclear defense or something like that. And it's the Cheyenne Mountain complex. Not sure how if it's still in use or what exactly is there, but it's a real place, right? And they basically, they weren't sponsored by the Air Force, but they had like consultants and that sort of thing. And in exchange for positive portrayal of the Air Force and of the military, they got access to a lot of props and details and advice, so that it all feels very real. So the uniforms, how people speak, the ranks, the details, like how things are done. Like from everything I've read, that is very authentic. That is one way in which they make it more real. And also, I think the scientist characters, and it's like a lot of characters in Stargate are scientists of some description. Like Daniel Jackson is an archaeologist, Samantha Carter is an astrophysicist, and then there are others introduced later on in the series. We get to see some in Atlantis as well. And they talk and behave pretty much like real scientists. Like I did science at university. I spent several years hanging around scientists. And as far as TV shows go, this might be the most authentic portrayal of scientists I've seen. Just how people talk, how they work. Like a lot of it is like super science, right? But a lot of it comes down to like showing the trial and error in working things out, and things go wrong, and then you analyze it, and then you try again, and then it works better. Like how real science is done, that drives a lot of plots of Stargate. Even though you have people like working with these fantastical, like there's teleporters and wormhole generators and plasma weapons and everything, but it still manages to make it feel like this is like if this was real, this is how it would be. But in terms of how it feels, they manage throughout the entire series, manage to make it feel very real. And I think to me, that was one of the things that actually is part of the core appeal. And like that is not true for something like Star Trek, for instance. Like Star Trek scientists don't behave like real scientists, for instance. But I don't know how much of an appeal that is for most people. But for me, especially like I was watching like especially Stargate Atlantis while I was like in university writing my lab reports for physics, like for my physics class and stuff like that, right? It felt more authentic than anything else in science fiction, especially TV, especially at the time. So for me, that is one of the things that's made it special, but I don't know how much that resonates with most people.
Is there anything else from the show that it could connect with like just the average viewer that's hasn't been around scientists or doesn't really know much about the military? And like I mentioned the themes, which I thought were great, which I thought were good. So I think for me, so I don't even know much about scientists, I don't know much about the military, but the themes which I mentioned, what I got out from, I said, okay, you know what, it connected with me in moments, right? So I think for people, maybe it's a thing where it connected with them with like, you know, for moments. Because if they advertise it as in like, you know, the way that you pretty much just explained it, in terms of like it's very grounded and, you know, like it's realism mixed with the whole science fiction. If they advertise it like that, then I think it should have been bigger.